A man was driving a truck across the Crimean Bridge. He had no idea what kind of cargo was loaded in his trailer. He just thought it was another routine delivery. At that moment, on the parallel railway bridge behind him, a freight train with 7 tankers full of diesel was slowly approaching. Just as the truck and the train met in the very center of the bridge, the explosives inside the trailer suddenly detonated. They were wrapped in industrial plastic film. A 50-meter-high fireball tore through the sky, ripping 2 sections of the road bridge right from the base of their piers. They crumbled and fell into the strait. The train's fuel tankers ruptured, and burning diesel sprayed across the bridge's structure. Billowing smoke was still clearly visible from 50 kilometers away. Until the very end of his life, the man never knew what he was actually carrying in his truck. In the spring of 2022, a photograph of the Crimean Bridge appeared on the desk of the head of the Security Service of Ukraine, Vasyl Malyuk, in his office. This cross-sea engineering feat took years to build and cost $4 billion. It was not only a transportation hub connecting mainland Russia with the Crimean Peninsula, but also a powerful symbol of Russia's de facto control over Crimea. Over the next 6 months, this bridge became Malyuk's target. He initiated this operation not because he received an order from Zelensky, but because he wanted to prove through action that even the most heavily fortified defense line could be breached. At the time, in everyone's eyes, bombing the bridge was a complete and utter fantasy. But Malyuk firmly believed that only by completing this seemingly impossible mission could they truly choke the throat of the Russian army's southern front. This bridge was the key. He had to prove it was possible. The plan was meticulously developed over months. Every detail was scrutinized. The operation relied on precise timing and execution. Malyuk's team worked in secret, understanding the immense risk and the symbolic weight of their target. For them, it was more than just a bridge. It was a challenge to a narrative of invincibility. And Malyuk was determined to answer that challenge. The fate of the southern front could depend on it. This bridge, it was responsible for 70% of the southern Russian front's military supply transportation. Cutting off this logistical lifeline would be the same as choking off the southern Russian army's supply channel. But the difficulty of blowing up the bridge was obvious. The bridge's pillars were sunk 90 meters into the seabed, and its very construction was designed to withstand damage. Conventional missiles would be ineffective, and Ukraine didn't have the kind of heavy-duty, ground-penetrating bunker-buster bombs required. Malyuk thought outside the box of conventional missile strikes and proposed delivering the bomb directly by vehicle to be detonated on the bridge. But new problems immediately followed. The Crimean Bridge consists of a road bridge and a railway bridge running parallel to each other. The 2 bridges are 25 meters apart, each with its own independent support pillars. The shockwave from a single truck bomb would be completely unable to damage both structures at the same time. His engineering team then came up with a bold idea to precisely time the truck bomb's explosion to coincide with a passing fuel tanker train. After the shockwave ruptured the fuel tankers, the leaking diesel fuel would be ignited by the flames. Temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, burning continuously for hours, wouldn't be enough to melt the steel, but it would reduce its structural integrity by 90%, causing the railway bridge pillars to warp and deform, rendering the tracks completely useless for transport. This would achieve the effect of disabling both bridge structures with a single explosion. But the prerequisite for all of this was absolute, perfect timing. To pull off this plan, the first problem to solve was how to disguise the explosives. The security on the Crimean Bridge was extremely high. The Federal Security Service's patrol personnel were trained to spot any anomaly. They used radar to monitor approaching ships 24 hours a day, and there were boats nearby. An electronic warfare system covered a 10-kilometer radius, would jam all unauthorized signals. Every truck that passed through had to go through an X-ray scanner capable of penetrating an engine block. Malyuk knew full well that every security system has its vulnerabilities. The core principle of the scanning equipment is to detect material density. Metal shows up as a bright image on the scanner, while organic materials appear dark. And the density of explosives falls right in between, making them extremely easy to identify. The engineering team's core objective was to alter the explosive's density signature through camouflage, making it indistinguishable from ordinary cargo under the scanner. The team conducted countless experiments to achieve this. On their first attempt, they tried hiding the RDX inside oil barrels. The difference in density was quickly picked up by the scanner, and the alarm went off immediately. For their second try, they stuffed the explosives into compressed peat bricks, but their irregular shape easily aroused the inspector's suspicion. It wasn't until the third attempt that the team turned their attention to the thin polyethylene heat shrink film, commonly used in industrial packaging. The most crucial element was precise control over the thickness of the wrapping. By wrapping enough layers of plastic film around the explosive core, the overall average density could be made to match that of ordinary cargo. The copper detonator rods, in turn, could be hidden inside the hard cardboard tubes at the center of the film rolls. The precise density calculations took the team several weeks. The margin of error for the wrapping thickness had to be controlled down to the millimeter. If they wrapped too much plastic film, the overall weight would be suspiciously high. But wrap too little, and the RDX's density signature would be completely exposed. The team ran dozens of simulated scan tests, constantly making adjustments. The wrapping tension of the thin film, the placement of the homogeneous detonator rods was changed and repeatedly optimized. And finally, in August 2022, 21 tons of explosives were successfully disguised as a large shipment of industrial packaging material. However, creating the disguised bomb was only the first step. How to get it across this European bridge, the most heavily monitored on the continent, was the real test. From Ukraine to Crimea, all direct routes had Russian checkpoints. Malyuk therefore planned a circuitous route, with a plan to pass through 5 countries, cross 4 border checkpoints, and avoid any physical inspections for the entire journey. August 2022. On a dock in the port of Odessa, a container marked industrial packaging film was slowly loaded onto a cargo ship. The delivery address was a shell furniture company in Crimea. To minimize the risk of a leak, Malyuk strictly limited the number of people in the know to just 3. The vast majority of his subordinates were completely unaware of this operation. He knew that any leak could cause the entire plan to end in catastrophic failure. After leaving Odessa, the cargo ship didn't sail directly toward Crimea, but instead headed west. The first stop was the port of Ruse, Bulgaria. The container passed with only a document check, getting through smoothly. The second stop was Poti, Georgia. At the port, customs officials checked the documents and let it pass. Still, there was no physical inspection. The third stop brought them to a logistics center in Yerevan, Armenia. This was the key node in the entire transit process, and also the most dangerous part. If a customs officer were to cut open the shrink wrap to inspect it, the 21 tons of hexogen inside could instantly detonate. The 21 tons of hexogen inside could instantly detonate. To get through this checkpoint smoothly, Malyuk arranged for a middleman to take over the shipment. After receiving the goods, he created new shipping documents, completely erasing the cargo's original Ukrainian origin information. He changed the sender to an Armenian trading company, completely severing the cargo's ties to Ukraine. And just like that, after multiple transfers, the container, in early October 2022, successfully entered Russian territory and was transported to the Krasnodar Krai, to a warehouse in the city of Armavir. Here, the shipping documents were modified once again. The sender was changed to a local Russian company, while the recipient remained the same fictitious enterprise in Crimea. At this point, Malyuk still needed to find a suitable driver, one who wouldn't ask too many questions about the cargo and could successfully deliver it across the bridge. In the fall of 2022, an ad appeared on a Russian freight information platform. It was a simple transport request, a routine delivery from Armavir to Simferopol. The pay was far above the standard rate, with no additional requirements for the carrier. 51-year-old Yusubov didn't think much of it and accepted the job. On the morning of the operation, he drove his heavy truck to the designated warehouse, watching as workers loaded 22 neatly sealed plastic film pallets, one by one, into his cargo container. The appearance of the goods matched the heat shrink film listed on the documents perfectly. He carefully checked the container's seal, signed the transport papers, and then drove off. To him, this was just another routine transport job for some easy money. He never imagined that once he set out, there would be no turning back. October 2022. Before dawn on the 8th, Yusubov's truck slowly approached the entrance to the Crimean Bridge. The guards on duty followed procedure, circling the vehicle for inspection. They checked the license plate information one by one and confirmed the cargo container's seal was intact. At the same time, they checked the shipping documents. All steps were strictly followed according to standard procedure. The guard opened the container doors for a quick scan. Inside were 22 neatly arranged pallets wrapped in plastic film. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. However, the guard then did something unexpected. He took out a portable density meter used for random checks. He held the density meter against the first 2 pallets. The test results showed the material was normal. In the end, the fatigue of the early morning hours made the guard decide against using the CT6035 X-ray scanner for a full inspection. He closed the container doors and waved the vehicle through. This chance decision became the critical turning point between the success and failure of the entire operation. As Yusubov drove onto the bridge's approach, freight train number 3009 also departed from Taman Station. Operators in Kyiv, using intercepted railway dispatch data, were tracking the train's trajectory in real time. The timing had to be perfect, down to the second. At 6:02 a.m., Yusubov's truck was traveling at 70 kilometers per hour on the main span of the bridge. Parallel to it, the fuel tanker train on the tracks was also accelerating. At 6:03 a.m., the truck and the train precisely reached the very center of the Crimean Bridge at the exact same moment. At that instant, the detonators inside the plastic-wrapped cargo successfully received the detonation signal. Even though the Crimean Bridge's entire area was covered by an electronic warfare system that could effectively interfere with GPS signals within a 10-kilometer radius, the hybrid system developed by Malyuk's team. At that instant, the detonators inside the plastic-wrapped cargo successfully received the detonation signal. Even though the Crimean Bridge's entire area was covered by an electronic warfare system that could effectively interfere with GPS signals within a 10-kilometer radius, the hybrid system developed by Malyuk's team, the detonation device didn't rely on a single signal source, ensuring the explosion occurred at the precise, preset moment. The explosive yield was equivalent to 21 tons of TNT. Instantly detonated, the shockwave swept across the sea at 340 meters per second. Windows in buildings 3 kilometers away were shattered. The several thousand-ton road bridge instantly twisted, buckled, and collapsed into the dark strait. The oil tankers on the railway tracks were ripped apart by the shockwave. Leaked diesel fuel ignited, erupting into a massive inferno. The flames burned continuously for 4 hours, with the temperature on site soaring to 1,100 degrees Celsius. The structural steel of the railway bridge softened and warped in the intense heat, completely losing its load-bearing capacity. Russian engineers later confirmed that the bridge could no longer handle the task of transporting heavy military supplies. The paralysis of the railway bridge became a truly strategic strike by the Ukrainian military against the Russian logistics system. The explosion caused the deaths of 5 people, including Yusubov. The mastermind, Malyuk, watched the massive fireball rise on the monitor screen. 6 long months of meticulous planning had finally come to fruition. However, the Crimean Bridge was not completely paralyzed by this attack. In November of 2022, Russian engineers began working day and night on emergency repairs. By May of 2023, the bridge was fully operational again. This crucial logistical artery had once again sprung back to life. Far away in Kyiv, Malyuk had been closely monitoring the progress of the bridge repairs. His deputy once proposed launching another attack, but he flatly refused. He believed the Russians had already learned their lesson from the last incident. All the vulnerabilities exploited in the 2022 operation had been plugged by the Russians. Malyuk's side had completely outmaneuvered them. They always believed they had already exposed the Russian side's soft underbelly. Now, it was time to make them understand that the speed of their security adjustments could never keep up with our side's destructive and innovative pace. He opened the folder on his desk, codenamed Sea Baby, and pointed out that the Russian side had reinforced the road bridge deck and strengthened the checkpoint defenses, but they neglected the vast sea beneath the bridge. Those concrete piers rising from the water's surface had no underwater protective netting, and on the surface, there were no floating barriers, creating a new opening. In the spring of 2023, inside a top-secret workshop in Ukraine, engineers were working around the clock to assemble the drone codenamed Sea Baby, an unmanned surface vessel. This unmanned vessel featured a 6-meter-long, flat-bottomed hull design, equipped with an advanced water jet propulsion system. The unmanned compartment was loaded with 850 kilograms of high explosives. Its navigation system operated via an encrypted satellite link, making it highly resistant to GPS signal jamming. With a top speed of 80 kilometers per hour and a range of over 900 kilometers, it was capable of crossing the entire Black Sea. In 2023, on the night of July 16th, at 11 p.m., near the Ukrainian coastline, 5 Sea Baby unmanned surface vessels quietly slipped out of the harbor and into the waters of the Black Sea, heading towards the Crimean Bridge 900 kilometers away at full speed. At 3:15 a.m., the monitoring screen suddenly showed the Russian frigate, the Admiral Essen, a clear radar signature. 2 of the unmanned vessels deliberately broke from the formation to carry out a decoy mission. At 4 a.m., Russia's air defense systems finally reacted. Su-27 fighter jets scrambled into the air. The remaining 3 unmanned boats quickly scattered to evade. Contact with the satellite was lost for 47 seconds. When the signal returned, the fuel in 3 of the 5 unmanned boats had been completely depleted. Operators initiated their self-destruct sequence in the waters near Yalta. The only 2 remaining unmanned boats continued pushing toward the target. July 17th, 5:20 a.m., the Kerch Strait. 2 unmanned boats rapidly approached the bridge from the southwest. 2 minutes later, the first impact. 850 kilograms of explosives detonated violently against a bridge pier. The road surface of the bridge instantly cracked and shifted, and a section of it came crashing down. 4 seconds later, the second impact followed. The other unmanned boat precisely slammed into an adjacent pier, and another section of the bridge collapsed. Although the railway part of the bridge wasn't completely severed, this attack made Ukraine the first nation in the world to successfully use maritime drones to strike a target with such precision from such a great distance.